If you're familiar at all with this channel, then you may know, as I'm sure I've mentioned it many, many times, I'm Canadian, very proud Canadian, love Canada, it's great, and I'll bring up Canadianisms whenever I can, I guess. But if you're not Canadian yourself, maybe you don't know that Canadian Thanksgiving actually takes place in October. So it's a very busy month for us. You know, we have the Halloween, we have the Thanksgiving, scary movies, pumpkin pie, chocolate treats, all that great stuff. What I'm kind of reflecting on this Thanksgiving is that, I am thankful, truly, truly I am, that we do really seem to be past kind of the dark days of horror movies, where if you look back to early to mid 2000s, it was really just kind of a wasteland, with obviously with exceptions, but this was a time when we'd see just remake after remake, shitty new version after shitty new version. It was just bad, and I think we are past that. Well, truly, we are. Yeah, obviously, we'll have remakes here and there, and we'll have kind of the new stuff, which is like the requels, kind of like the half reboot, half sequel kind of stuff, and every other type you can kind of imagine. And we've gotten some really, really great horror movies, specifically within the last, like, let's say 10 years or so. And we seem to be in a good place. And especially now with the age of streaming, there are a lot of good and even bad horror movies that can reach an audience in a way that they may not have been able to just 10, 15 years ago or so. So it's kind of like the 80s video boom all over again, which is great. So I am thankful for where we seem to be right now with the horror genre. Much better than it was in 2006, where we had all the remakes. And of course, today's review is When a Stranger Calls 2006 edition. Now, I never saw this movie when it first came out, though I definitely saw a fair amount of other remakes, but this one eluded me. But since on this channel I watched the original, When a Stranger Calls, and its sequel from the 90s, it's straight to Showtime sequel, I thought, hey, there's never going to be a better time to finally check this out. Quite frankly, I forgot that it existed. I'm sure many other people did too. But hey, how bad could it be? There must be some decent stuff to it. I'll give it a watch. So I gave it a watch, and I don't know. Long story short is the movie's a piece of shit, and not even really like an interesting piece of shit. Like where you can look at certain remakes during this era, and you think, wow, I can't believe that what were they thinking with that? They really fucked up this great original. It's kind of in maybe a strange place where, I mean, definitely When a Stranger Calls had its reputation. It had its praise, particularly for the opening scene, which critics have said, and I've said myself, really it doesn't live up as a whole to the first 20 minutes that are really good, really tense, very memorable, and like, of course, like inspired stuff like Scream, right? So now we have this whole new generation to tell this new kind of story, and it's interesting because this is the age of the cell phone now, or at least it felt like it at the time. Funny how like you can absolutely tell specifically movies made anywhere between like say 2002 and 2008 because of the type of cell phones. It's just this very specific kind of point in history where the cell phones were the way they were, right? You know what I mean? The flip phones, and you text by like pressing the numbers over and over again. You had limited minutes, nighttime hours, stuff like that. What a racket. Now they just overcharge for the fun of it instead of putting imaginary rules. But you would think maybe that could play a little bit into it. So we have like a killer or deranged maniac stalking this babysitter when she's alone with the children sleeping upstairs, on a spooky night, and and somehow the cell phone stuff can kind of play into it, and it sort of does, sort of like not to the best effect that it could, I guess. I don't think it really utilizes the technology that was available at the time, if that counts for anything. But the thing is, I mean, again, since it's not like just the most beloved movie original in the world, I mean, some people, especially those familiar with horror, are at least aware of the original. I mean, they could have done anything, gone anywhere, which, you know, I guess they have free reign, and they don't do much with the concepts. And I think the movie, it does actually kind of answer a question as to, could the original have worked if instead of doing the 20-minute opening, which is very good, and slapping all the extra stuff, police procedural, and the 5 years or 7 years later kind of story to it, would it have worked if it was just one long version of that first scene, which this one basically is, though they do tag on a little thing at the beginning to show that there is some history with the crazed killer guy. And the answer is no. A lot of padding into this movie. I mean, like, just like the worst thing about it and why it's so bad is that it's just not interesting. It's not bad in an interesting way. It's not an adaptation that's interesting, and it's just kind of boring. A lot of filler scenes. Her just kind of looking around the house. The babysitter. It's still the same name, if that counts for anything. Jill Johnson, this time played by Camilla Bell, who, I mean, the name sounds familiar to me, but I couldn't tell you anything else that she's in. And it's kind of funny, actually. Like the whole plot of this movie, it kind of is like kickstarted by cell phone technology at the time, because she's having her little fight with her boyfriend or whatever, and she goes over her minutes, and her parents punish her by making her babysit. And her parent is actually Clark Gregg, pre-Marvel Clark Gregg, who's in one scene in the movie, but whatever. So that's why she's babysitting, if that matters at all, which it doesn't. So there you go, and you can expect the same kind of stuff that we saw from the opening from the original. The stranger calls, and there's no voice on the other end. Sometimes there is a voice. Have you checked on the children? What do you want from me? Your blood, and all that. So I mean, they take this stuff that's memorable and stretch it out to barely 90 minutes, I guess. And that's the movie, and it's stupid and boring and not interesting whatsoever. Added to the fact that, I mean, not that it's that big of a deal comparing it to the original, because I don't think the original was like a real hard R or anything like that, or even had like any like bloody scenes. It is a PG-13 horror remake, which is like just the worst of the worst from this era. With a star in it like Camilla Bell, it looks like it's like someone from the Disney Channel starring in these movies. They all have to have a certain kind of aesthetic. They all have to appeal to the younger horror audience, if there really is one, I guess. Well, I mean, I'm sure there is one, but they can handle the more gruesome stuff. And it just goes through the motions. Not very interesting at all. I'll give it some credit for the inclusion of the stranger, which is actually kind of a role played by two actors. With the voice that calls, it's Lance Henriksen, which is a brilliant casting choice. I mean, he just has this incredible voice. Very unnerving, unsettling, and he gives it his all for the few lines of dialogue that he speaks. Does a great job. I love Lance Henriksen, Bishop forever. And the physical person who plays the stranger is not in fact Lance Henriksen, but Tommy Flanagan, great actor from Gladiator, Sons of Anarchy, and all kinds of stuff. And actually, well, kind of funny because both him and Lance Henriksen were in Alien versus Predator. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. I don't know, but he does a good job too. He has a good presence, spooky presence, but none of it saves the movie. I mean, you can, and I did myself, you can just pretty much imagine exactly what this movie would be, and you're right. This era, this type of remake, you know exactly what you're in for, and it's no good. There are points where this almost feels like it's a TV movie, which is funny because the Stranger Calls again, or When a Stranger Calls Back, that was a TV movie, and it's a million times better than this. So avoid this at all costs. The first two, though, check those out. Those are pretty decent movies. Pretty decent movies. This one, rightfully forgettable, not worth checking out. So kind of a miss for this inclusion in my spooky movie marathon month. But we're doing more reviews here on the channel for 31 days of horror movie reviews all throughout October. So be sure to stay tuned for more. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Until next time, I'll see you later and stay scared.